You know what I mean? It sounds a little odd. There's always an odd note. As a matter of fact, every other note sounds like an odd note. I'm very attracted to that because to me that suspends the story. And you have a lot more real estate to spread out the message of the song. But I put it together with another scale. Yesterday, when Paul and I were just sort of jamming against that low E drone, we were just throwing back little phrases that were using different keys, different modes, all on top of E. And you start to hear sort of the night and day attitude and all the shades in between which each of these things can do. What's interesting about modes is some of them really go together really well. They complement each other, flow from one to the other. Some of them are very subtle. Some of them, it's just like a slap in the face, like what happened, you know. I use this thing to effect in so many songs. To me, it is one of the biggest tools that we have as musicians when we're in front of an audience to create a mood and to change the mood. Everybody hears all of your notes against the bass note. Keep that in mind. It's the simplest way of explaining it in today's language. All your notes are felt and viewed against whatever the perceived bass note is, the root, the tonic. But think bass note, because that's basically the job of a modern band, is the bass players playing with the root, the tonic. Once you get that in your head, you realize that the relationship is really strong. It's stronger than you've ever thought before. And then if you can really understand, let's say there's maybe 17 different scales that you can use and not get arrested today, right? Or somehow slip them on the radio somehow. They will tweak the audience. You will control your audience with which one of those scales you use because of how their intervals, their notes, relate to the root. So this song is just kind of like playing around with it. As I look after the fact, I look at it and I go, oh, that's what I did. Of course, it came from inspiration, but since we want to draw some conclusions from this, we'll introduce it that way. And maybe with my eyebrows, I'll raise them up every time I change the key. But it's obvious. And what else can I tell you about this song as soon as I find it, wherever it may be? Oh, it's just that the guitar part, let me just play it quietly for you. So, it's in D. Major third, minor third, right away, like what key are we in? That's the first thing you hear. That's completely unstable. So that was the riff that I presented to Eric Valentine. It was written on bass guitar. And it had this whole thing. E string was tuned down to D. Big, you know, distorted, crazy sounding bass guitar part. And I said, then I do this thing where I'm going, see if I can play it without the drop D. So this part of the answer part in the bass line is just a flat 7, a root, minor third, and the root. So it's just like a blues rock line. So you think, well, how many notes is that? Well, there's 1, there's 2, there's 3. It's only 3 notes. And I realized that, well, there are a lot of D scales that I can play with here to shift the mood that have those same 3 notes. And that's kind of like what the key was here, was to play with the common notes and somehow get them to sort of sound like it's all one particular musical story, one musical message. Didn't want it to be too obvious. The third element was to have a melody on top that sort of skirted the whole thing once again, but in reverse. Instead of it being in the bass line, it would be in the melody line. And I'll play that for you in a second, but I realized I have to push that button. So I think I did it. Here we go.